Make a decision rather to sit down on the floor or sit in a chair. So here I am. Hello, everybody. Welcome to author Dishon Tracy. I'm going to be reading my book called But God, He's My Husband. And let me go ahead and sit up here a little bit. Um, and this book came from my real life story. A lot of people may not believe it, but it is a true story. And I want you to be a part of it. So if you have any questions, have any comments, please feel free to chat with me. I may not answer right, of course, during the streaming, but I will answer after the streaming. Um, I wrote this book to inspire others not to make the bad decisions that I made. It's very clear that now here in America, Christians are marrying people that they should not be marrying. They're dating people they shouldn't be dating. The Bible clearly states and tells you don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers. And there's a reason why Christ tells us that. He's trying to protect us. So I will be saying different things at different times in between. I'll be giving my own little commentary. And of course, you're welcome to do it as well. Okay, so let's get started. I'm not going to hold you long. And I will be broadcasting every Saturday from 3 p.m. And maybe holding you maybe 20 to 30 minutes. Some chapters are very short, so they'll be short. Okay, so let's get started. Dishon Tracy. I am Dishon. In Hebrew, this means walk upon. Since discovering the meaning of my name, I knew God was calling me to walk on water for the rest of my life. Ecclesiastes 9:11 states, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread on the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. Why did I write this book? Warning: be careful who you date and marry. Let me say that again. Be careful who you date and marry. I will first say I am not writing this book to embarrass anyone. I must be transparent with my life in order to rescue others. It was purely out of my disobedience to God that I was placed in a situation that could have cost me my physical and spiritual life and that of my children. I want the world to know you can have a successful marriage if you follow Christ's guidelines. According to biblical principles, that is. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 states, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what does righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? Some say, well, he or she is a believer. Then I say, what does the Bible say about this? Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree, oh, a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruit you will know them. Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 through 20. I did not say you would have the perfect marriage. Again, I did not say you would have the perfect spouse. In fact, sometimes it can be challenging when you are called together for the work of ministry. But you will bounce back if you know beyond a doubt that God has placed you together. If you are single and you are waiting for a relationship, the man that God has brought into your life, then I recommend this book to you. If you are already married, purchase this book anyway and give it to a friend as a gift. Do it. Do not hesitate. Time is of the essence. Before you marry that man or woman, please read this book. You may see similarities in some of the signs God and Satan sent me. Satan is a big counterfeiter. That's what I mean when I say that. You must seek the wise counsel of the Holy Spirit and yield to that voice. When you listen to God's voice, you will triumph over every obstacle the world places before you. Now let's get into it. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you that you brought these people to watch this channel. I thank you that you will pierce their hearts, Lord, and show them the right way to go. Father, I know your hope for them is good and not evil. In all their relationships, Father, I ask that you would show them the right path, the right way to go, Lord. And I ask that you will remove every obstacle from their life. In Jesus' name, amen. Chapter 1, Me. When I was born, I was neither rich nor poor. At least that is what I would love to believe. However, my family lineage said otherwise. My mother was a single parent when she conceived me. It seems she had a lot of support from my grandmother before my grandmother became a victim of alcoholism. Nevertheless, I did not know who my father was, but was told as an adult that he was from the Caribbean islands. When I was 6 months old, my mother married. Later, she had two more children. Mother was a very loving parent. She always tried to do the best she could for us children. My stepfather was as well. He never treated me any differently from his own biological offspring. That was why I did not know any differently until the relatives told me when I turned 12 years old that he was not my father. They were teenagers themselves and did not know any better. This led me to ask my mother the question about who my stepfather was. Her reply was my worst nightmare. No, he is not your biological father. As a 12-year-old, my world seemed to go downhill after that. I became very rebellious. Hold on a second. Let me make sure. Let me see something here. I'm seeing some messages. Okay, so everything is okay. Just want to make sure. Okay. As I was saying, this led me to ask my mother the question about who my stepfather was. Her reply was my worst nightmare. No, he is not your biological father. As a 12-year-old, my world seemed to go downhill after that. I became very rebellious and did not want to do what my parents asked of me. My reply would always be, he is not my real father anyway. Later in the marriage, my stepfather became an alcoholic. He had a very stressful job as a retail regional manager for a popular multi-purpose chain of stores, a lot like Walmart. It was pick and save back then. During this time, it was highly unlikely that an African American man would hold this type of position. Although the job was stressful, he managed to retain his position of employment for years. I remember he was a very hard worker and he drank on the weekend. Every year, he and my mother made sure the family took a vacation. We had a life filled with many trips to Orlando, Florida to see Disney World and family cookouts, but the days following were filled with tears, sorrow, and a hope for change. The day finally came when he and my mother separated and later divorced. I seemed to be the most affected. However, I am sure my brother and sister have their own opinion of this statement. Oh, how I raged on the inside, and my emotions went into two different directions. Now I know I was too young to grasp all these emotions. I loved my stepfather, but I was angry because he was not my biological father. I remember they would often fight, and she would leave and return home time after time until one day she never went back. My latest memories of these very devastating episodes were when my mother had me and my siblings locked in a room. My stepfather was knocking on the door relentlessly, and my brother was crying, saying he wanted to go with dad. My sister and I remained quiet, and mom silently told him to be quiet. He would not stop knocking on the door. That is my stepfather. He was then my brother was then taken to the store where my stepfather worked, and he came back with toys. The anger grew and grew like a wild animal against my stepfather. And when he and my mother would get into verbal and physical fights, I remember picking up a hot iron and wanting to strike him with it. One day, my mom was cooking in the kitchen. He kept taunting her until she picked up a cast iron skillet and broke his nose. He was very jealous to the point where he did not want us to go over to the more public beaches. We were always taken to a more secluded beach. Later saw why. A photo of my mom. Oh my goodness. After bearing 3 children, she still looked terrific in her little polka dot bikini. It was light blue and white. Sometimes my grandmother would walk inebriated with her dog from where she lived and across the railroad track in order to protect my mother. My eldest aunt was very protective of my mom as well. They were very strong-minded women and feared no one. I recall later my aunt speaking to drug dealers in a housing project, telling them to move away from her apartment and there would be consequences. She also did not mind beating up a woman or two in the neighborhood. Her mouth was like a sailor's, and no one messed around with Miss Frances. I recall a young boy So I'm sorry. I recall a young boy she babysat being abused by his mother, and my aunt discovered it. She refused to give the woman back her baby. She was going to report her to the authorities. The mother of that young baby decided she would take matters in her own hands and break the window of my aunt's apartment. Mm-mm-mm. Why did she do that? I remember my aunt beating her up and tossing her out of her apartment. It was later discovered that the mother was on some sort of drugs at that time. My grandmother was also a very humorous person, along with her bravery. I recall her playing spades, a card game, most of you know spades, with one of my cousins. The conversation went like this. Listen very carefully. My cousin said, "Grandma, you need to stop smoking those cigarettes. You are going to die of lung cancer one day." My grandmother replied, with a cigarette barely lit in the corner of her mouth. She had like this. You know how they had them cigarettes on the side of their mouth? And she said, and the ashes was about to fall out too. The ashes was hanging on the edge. And she had a handful of cards in her hand. And she said, "You know what?" Smoking her cigarette with her cards in her hand, she said, "Just like you're going to die from eating so much." It was so funny. She always had a lot of stuff to say. At the time, my cousin was overweight. He and the entire table of card players began to laugh out of control at her comment. This same grandma made light of how she threw potash, which is some sort of light colored chemical she kept in a pot for who knows what. If you're an older person, you probably know about potash. And she took that potash and threw it into my grandfather's face because she was angry. Then later used an old remedy and patted urine on a cloth. She took some urine on a cloth and patted it on his face to prevent damage to his face. He was a darker skinned man and could have had white spots on his face, but he did not because of her home remedy. Grandma always had lots of jokes and she loved her family very much. When she hugged you, it was always very, very tight. Oh, you couldn't hardly breathe. Although she was a very tiny woman, we gave her a lot of respect. She also fought her best friend and her best friend's daughter with a metal instrument when she found out her husband was cheating with her best friend. Grandmama did not spare the rod with us. She was more of a disciplinary than my mother. I remember that I was supposed to pick a switch up off the tree, but I never came back with that switch. Oh my goodness. My thought was I would have to wrap this thing, I was off the chain. In my head, I was like, you know what? I have to just take this switch and wrap it around grandmama's neck. Now, I know that's horrible to say, but when you have the spirit of the Antichrist dwelling in you, you will say and do anything. It almost brings me to tears right now to think that I would even be thinking something like that. But when you don't have the spirit of God in you, you have no remorse. You have nothing in you. It's like a blank hole that gives you any type of consciousness. That's why people can go around and kill like they do and have no consciousness about it. Most of them don't come to until they go to prison or something, but some of them don't. Like Charles Manson, for instance, that man stayed full of demons to the day he died. No conscience. Okay, let me find out where I was. But it was only a thought at that moment that later became something I actually told her. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. But somehow I remember saying things and thinking things that I had no control over. I do not remember my grandmother responding. She probably saw this manifestation of evil and did not know what to make of it. My evil mind was beginning to always be at war with me. I was a ticking time bomb. Anything could set me off. If I wanted to do something and was told no, I would begin to throw objects around the house. In other words, I would have a temper tantrum. Please add right at. Moreover, I remember my mom was going to take me and my siblings to the movie theater. But for some reason, we could not that day. She stated she would take us another time. Then she told us later that night that she was going with her boyfriend. I suspected there was not a children's show playing that day. Mom always took us to places and tried to show us a great time. But although she did, I still became enraged about her decision not to take us that night. So I did what I knew was best for me at the time: revenge. I was going to get revenge just because my mom told me on a single occasion that she was not going to take us to the movie theater. I decided I wanted to get revenge. So I took some sewing straight pins and placed them under the bed fitted sheet. So they was standing up so that when she got in bed, it would stick at her wherever, meaning it would stick her wherever. Those bed sheets, you have the sheets that's fitted on the bed. I remember taking these straight pins and sticking them straight up. So that if she got in that bed or that man got in that bed, they would be stuck. Isn't that crazy? But it's amazing how I remember these things. I know God brought it to my remembrance when I was writing this book, because there's a lot of things I left out, but there's certain particulars that had to be told to get the mindset that I had at that time. This could have been really lethal. Who knows how she would have laid down on that bed. I never knew exactly how it affected her, but I did find out she knew it was me. I was sure one of my siblings told her. But you know what? Even if they didn't tell her, I know she knew it had to be me, because my brother and sister didn't think that way. They were pretty decent, good children. So even if they told her or didn't tell her, she probably already knew. I shared everything I did with them. Although she knew I received no punishment for this, just as before, somehow, Mom understood something was wrong with me. Later, we moved in with my aunt for 6 months while my mother worked and went to school. As time went on, my life began to spiral out of control. This behavior would follow me throughout my adolescence and early adulthood. Anger, resentment, and rebellion became the norm. I remember once I threatened my sister and once held a knife to my brother's throat. I was just a ticking time bomb. Anything could set me off. Cursing was the English language to me. I literally enjoyed hearing myself curse. Now I can't stand to hear people curse. I can't stand it. But at that time, I loved it. I just loved the way my mouth felt. I just loved it. I even looked for opportunities to curse and fight someone. That was if someone bothered me or my family. My sister would commonly tell me about persons that were threatening her. She was a very fair-skinned, pretty girl, and many African Americans did not treat her kindly. She once even had someone offer her the use of their curl activator to lather her hair. We figured out later that they put bleach in the curl activator bottle. Wasn't that mean? This, of course, damaged her hair. Also, I fought and beat up her boyfriend, who threatened to fight her if she would not get back with him. I made it my business to be sure they never bothered her again. I would have done the same for my brother. However, he was the most obedient of us. He was quiet and very polite to anyone. My brother spent most of his time withdrawn in his room. I had learned how to fight when we lived with my aunt in the projects. I felt invincible, unstoppable, in search of peace, but could not find any. My mind was constantly riddled with mischief and evil. What can I do now? Good was warring with evil. My mother attempted many times to discipline me, but I would run away from her. I know now she spent many days on her knees for my soul. It was like I had two personalities. In school, I was predominantly under control. Then after school, I was completely another person. There was a part of me that wanted to make others believe I was a good person. Then the other, I did not care what others thought. The only time I got into a fight in school was when I was in the 7th grade. It was when I broke up with my boyfriend just for getting his afro cut. You know, back then they didn't have them little short haircuts you have now. They had the afros, and he got his hair cut, and I said, that's it. Isn't that funny? That's crazy how you think like that. I was only in the 7th grade. He was not happy with that decision and told one of the Brentwood girls, which is a housing project. She was one of those Brentwood bullies. Well, I don't know if he told her to beat me up. She just decided she was going to beat me up. This particular bully claimed him as a brother. What he did not realize was I had plenty of experiences of fighting after school with other kids. I also had an experience when my mother moved in with my eldest aunt. When my mom left, my stepfather, we moved in with her. I know I already mentioned that before. And she lived in the Hollybrook. Actually, the project was just as dangerous to live in as Brentwood, believe it or not. That Hollybrook was just as bad as Brentwood. Fighting and shootings were a part of everyday life, believe it or not. I was known to be the cute girl. However, there was a rage on the inside. If it was disturbed in the slightest way, it just come on out. So my former boyfriend never expected me to come out on the top. That is why you can never judge anyone from the exterior experience. Just like me now, people would never know I had this story. We must have sharp discerners. So one day I was in the locker room, minding my own business, getting ready for track practice. She came in and mentioned the fact that she did not like what I did to her preteen brother. This girl was built like a short man. Seriously, like one of the little short men. She was built like a little short man. She didn't look feminine at all. But I didn't care. I had beaten up girls and boys in the past. So she did not scare me. The first maneuver I did was to place her in the headlock. That was my favorite. How you just take them like this and put them underneath there, and the head is going that way, and their body That was my favorite position. So after a few punches, I threw her in a nearby garbage can. I picked this, as skinny as I was, I wasn't but this big. They used to call me olive oil. My mom's boyfriend, he called me olive oil. I was so skinny. But this girl was muscular and kind of heavy. But I picked that girl up and threw her right in that garbage can. It was not my own physical strength that picked that girl up. When I think back on it, I was very skinny and she was much thicker than I was. After the fight, of course, the word traveled in school that the cute at the time and shy girl beat up the school bully. Mm-hmm. I also remember the time when we moved into this short two-story home. But let me go back to that. You know, when you get in a fight at school, somebody find out that you done beat somebody up, especially a bully, you don't have to worry about nobody else bothering you. But I'm not just saying that to encourage kids to go fight somebody, because you shouldn't fight people. You know, you gotta stay, calm and cool and go tell your parents and, tell the school officials, even though sometimes that don't even help. So I also remember the time when we moved into this two-story home. In the attic was a Ouija board. Now, let me explain to you what a Ouija board is. A Ouija board is a spirit board where people gather together and ask the spirit world different questions, and it spells the answer out to you by using your hands involuntarily. So this board, a lot of y'all might be familiar with it. It has letters on it and looks like two people or whatever. I never played it, wouldn't play it, but it was in our house. It was up in the attic. And so my mom got rid of that. My mom knew it was evil and threw it out. But now that I think about it, in the environment we moved in, people practiced witchcraft there. They had left a portal open for those evil spirits. The house was 2 stories with an A-frame roof. Nonetheless, we were so excited that Mother had climbed up the medical ladder. She went from certified nursing assistant to registered nurse. It took her 10 years to complete it. Many obstacles went before her. Physical and financial abuses were 2 of them, but she was strong and tenacious. Very soft-spoken, but not a push around. I was not any help in this new home. I always had many voices speaking to me. They would tell me to starve myself and do unusual bad things. Now that I am in the field of psychology, I was in the field of psychology, I'm no longer doing that. I understand when a patient states they are hearing voices telling them to do bad things. Come to think about it, I could have really easily been one of those patients, easily. But I don't think my mom would think twice about admitting me to one of those units. Nonetheless, I felt the rage even more since we moved there. Once when I was sick, my sister came to check on me. I would turn my head like the exorcist and say, "Now look what you've done." Just to scare her and get a good laugh. You know that movie, The Exorcist? I guess I was trying to portray that. When I was in the 10th grade, the school I attended was a predominantly Black school. Prior to this, I had attended predominantly white schools where Blacks were bused into those schools if they did not live in the neighborhood or district. I began to skip school regularly. My best friend and I could go to the corner store and purchase Mad Dog 2020. Yes, that's what we went to purchase. Utilizing very cheap ways to get drunk fast and wobble our way back home. We would then go watch the soap operas and eat French fries and hot dogs all day until school was out. One night I had a dream that I was going to fail school and I could not get into my locker. As bad as I thought I was, I did not want to remain in that school. Dropping out of school was not an option for me. I never wanted to be labeled a dummy. So I pulled myself together, went to night classes to make up some courses, and completed high school with honors. My mother was very proud, and as she exclaimed, "I knew you could do it." And I know in between me acting insane and sane, my mom was praying. Because oftentimes I might look through the crack of a window and I would see her on her knees praying and crying. And I know those were the things that kept me from going way over the top. I could have been way over the top. But it seems like those prayers kind of, I might jump over here, but then I come back here. I jump over, So I know it's the prayers of the righteous that avail much that kept me. So I'm telling you this to tell you that you have wayward children, continue to pray for them. Don't give up on the children. That is what the enemy is waiting on. He's waiting on you to give up on your children so he can snatch them and pull them into the bowels of hell. But thank God for the saints, because it wasn't just my mom praying. I'm sure she had a prayer chain, prayer warriors praying for me all the time. And this is why I'm here today. So anyway, let me get back to the reading. So one night I had a dream that I was going to fail, and I already read that, didn't I? So I read that. My mom always spoke positively to us and was always there for us. She prayed for us consistently. When I was in the 10th grade, I became sexually active as well, but not promiscuous. Not that I'm trying to act like I'm so much better than anybody else, but I became sexually active, but I wasn't sleeping around with a whole bunch of people. I had only slept with one person. I was his first as well, at least. He didn't want me to think that, but I believe I was, because he didn't know what he was doing. Although he tried to act as if he had done this before, I could tell that he had not. He was 3 years older than I was, but his mother was very strict and she did not allow him and his brother to be out after dark. He was a fraternal twin and was very nice to me. One day he was put out of his mother's apartment because he stayed out after dark to see me. So without my mother's knowledge, I allowed him to actually live with us. He was just like this looks like a little basement, but it's actually a little loft. And my sister and I were on the second floor, but he lived with us. That was easy because my sister and I had our own bedrooms upstairs, and mother hardly ever came up there. My mom just didn't feel like walking up those stairs. And plus we had our own phone line. We also had our own phone, the landlines, of course. There were no cell phones then. He had graduated high school by then. When I could, I would cook him breakfast or bring him a plate from the dinner we had. Now, he was not a guy who was going to be dependent on me, so he would often leave and search for a job, which I didn't want him to do. It's like I didn't even want him to leave the house. I left the window upstairs unlocked for him and kept a ladder nearby. This went unnoticed for a while until my mother and new stepfather heard something coming from upstairs and checked. He was then found. I did not like how my stepfather behaved about it, so I sought out revenge on him. My stepfather, I was like, okay, you gonna find this young boy who has no business being upstairs anyway? I have something for you. While he and mom were out one day, I looked in their dresser drawers for some sort of evidence of marijuana. I was like, I know this man smoking marijuana. I see him in his van smoking. So I was suspicious he was smoking, but to my surprise, I found much more than that. He had a white powdery substance in aluminum foil. Even at that age, I knew it had to be a drug. So I took some table sugar and mixed it in. Oh, how I laughed. I just laughed and laughed and laughed at the fact that I'm putting this sugar in this man Coke, and he gonna try to sniff it or whatever he gonna try to do. And it's just gonna be so hilarious when he does, because he's not gonna be able to approach me about it. He's not gonna be able to tell on me about it, because guess what? He's not supposed to have it. So that's what was so hilarious to me. I laughed so much, I almost urinated in my clothes while mixing the two. I knew the day he found out because when I came from school, he had the police there, thinking he could have my boyfriend locked up. But to his surprise, my boyfriend had moved all his belongings as well. He had moved in with his grandmother, and I skipped school to be with him, and we continued our relationship over there. Shortly after that, I became pregnant. My mother wanted me to complete high school, so she took me to a physician to get an abortion. My boyfriend at the time had no knowledge that this was going to take place. I never even told him I was pregnant. Before I could tell him, my mom had already confirmed I was pregnant. So the same day I was having the abortion was the same day he called all day. It seemed as though somehow he knew something was wrong. When I did finally tell him, he cried for months. He would often ask me why I did what I did, but I did not tell him. So we're going to stop for tonight. I'm not going to hold you any longer. Let's see how many minutes did we go here. Ooh, 42 minutes. That's a long time. I had no intention of going that long. So we will start off where we left off. Saturday, you meet me here at 3:00. We'll probably be in a different location, but I look forward to hearing from you. Like and subscribe. And I ask that you would, if you have any questions, that you would go ahead and put it in the chat, and I'll be glad to answer those questions for you as best I can. And until then, you have a great and blessed and prosperous week. And I hope that I said something tonight that will help you in your journey of life. Be blessed. This is Dishon Tracy. Oh, and I forgot to mention this. Let's see here. My book. Now I can't find the. My book is, if you can see that, I'm going to do better about this, but I'm new at this, as you can see. My book is being sold at Amazon.com. It's being sold at Barnes & Noble. And it's being sold at Walmart. And it's also being sold in some of the thrift stores and different places. So be blessed. Have a great week. Bye-bye.